this lesson, we are going to work on chain rule. Our objective is finding a formula for derivative of combination of two functions. F of g of x and f at g of x are the same. Let's start with h of x equals f of g of x. By definition, derivative of h of x is limit of f of g of x plus h minus f of g of x over h as h approaches 0. We times and divide this fraction by g of x plus h minus g of x. And we rewrite it in the form of f of g of x plus h minus f of g of x divided by g of x plus h minus g of x times g of x plus h minus g of x over h. Since limit of multiplication is multiplication of the limits, derivative can be written as limit of f of g of x plus h minus f of g of x over g of x plus h minus g of x as h approaches 0 times limit of g of x plus h minus g of x over h as h approaches 0. The second limit, limit of g of x plus h minus g of x over h as h approaches 0, is obviously g prime of x. In the first limit, if we assume g of x plus h minus g of x is t, then this can be written as limit of f of g of x plus t minus f of g of x over t as t approaches 0, which is derivative of f of g of x. Therefore, h prime of x is f prime of g of x times g prime of x. Let's use this formula and find derivative of h of x equals 9 times x3 minus 9x2 plus 7 to the power of 5. If we call 9x5 f of x and x3 minus 9x2 plus 7 g of x, then f prime of x is 45x4 and g prime of x is 3x2 minus 18x. Therefore, derivative of h of x is f prime of g of x times g prime of x. F prime of g of x is 45 times x3 minus 9x2 plus 7 to the power of 4, and g prime of x is 3x2 minus 18x. Therefore, h prime of x would be 45 times x3 minus 9x2 plus 7 to the power of 4 times 3x2 minus 18x. Let's have another example. H of x equals cube root of x2 plus x plus 1. If we assume f of x is cube root of x and g of x is x2 plus x plus 1, h of x is f of g of x. Derivative of f of x is 1 over 3 cube root of x2. Notice that cube root of x is 1 over 3 x to the power of 1 over 3, and its derivative is 1 over 3 x to the power of negative 2 over 3. And g prime of x is 2x plus 1. Therefore, h prime of x is f prime of g of x, which is 1 over 3 times cube root of x2 plus x plus 1 to the power of 2, times g prime of x times 2x plus 1. This means h prime of x is 2x plus 1 over 3 times cube root of x3 plus x plus 1 to the power of 2. By using Leibniz notation, if we say y is f of u and u is g of x, dy dx would be dy du times du dx. It is just writing f of g of x in another form. If we call g of x u, f of u is f of g of x. Let's find derivative of a function that's defined as y equals 5u2 and u equals x2 minus x minus 2 with respect to x, derivative of y with respect to x when x is 1. By chain rule, dy dx is dy du times du dx. dy du is 10u, du dx is 2x minus 1. Therefore, dy dx at x equals 1 is 10u times 2x minus 1 when x is 1, and u is negative 2. Notice u is x2 minus x minus 2. That means when x is 1, u is 1 minus 2, which is minus 2. This means derivative y with respect to x at x equals 1 is negative 20. This can be written for more than two functions. Let's assume y is f of u is g of x, and x equals h of t. Derivative of y with respect to t is derivative of y with respect to u times derivative of u with respect to x times derivative of x with respect to t. We basically found derivative of f of g of h of x. Let's recap. In this lesson, we found a formula for chain rule in two forms. F of g of x prime is g prime of x times f prime of g of x. dy dx is dy du times du dx times dx dt if we assume y is a function of u is a function of x, and x is a function of t. Thank you.